Wyatt Paxton is our speaker, and I do not have a bio on Wyatt, but Wyatt works with the Integrity Project with Ruth and Terry and Brenda and a whole bunch of other folks. And so he'll give you the 411 on that. Okay, how many of you have ever had to pull a permit for something in the county?
Was it fun? Did you like that?
Wyatt's an expert on that.
Many people do. So, I didn't really prepare my own bio, but I worked in agriculture for years and years, and went back to college at 39 and got my college degree because I always wanted to. Ended up hurting my back, and ended up my degree was building technology, and I said, what do you do with a building technology degree? Oh, you're a building inspector or a building official. I said, I hate those guys. I'll be one of those guys. They all seem like they're failed contractors, and they all have egos, and they're going to tell you how to do it. So when I worked for the government, I worked from that aspect was public service. You paid me a fee to process your building permit. I gave you advice or guidance on how to get that done. Ended up retiring, and people asked me to start a business. It was called Permits Plus Solutions, and I help people process building permits. Of course, I only got the bad ones. When I worked at Trinity County, I managed environmental health, building, airports, and public development. And when I got all those red accounts into the black, then they gave me cemeteries, motor pool, parks and grounds. So I used ag principles, how to balance budgets and make people perform. So I was asked by Ruth to look at the Integrity Project on how we can try to get county employees or even city employees how to be user-friendly. And so I started working from that aspect. I worked in several jurisdictions. I interned in the city of Chico, worked in Glenn County, worked in Shasta County, was a plan checker here between 6 and 7 years, went to Trinity County. I was a building official there and managed 8 departments there when I finally retired. So I know how these departments work. So the Tea Party is really essentially what Integrity Project is all about. We're trying to get the employees to work for you and for public benefit. You'll be surprised how much these fees add up to. It's on the website. You can look it up for Shasta County. I believe their last year's budget was $2+ million for building and planning. So the Integrity Projects, how many's heard of the Integrity Project? Know of it? Okay, good. Our view was, when we started, was to simply try to inspire change and build relationships with the county employees and see if we could move forward. That didn't work very well because that change has to come from the top down. It doesn't really come with that person at the counter. The person at the counter, I've been one of those people, and you're directed on how to process that permit and move it forward. So with a lot of the failed policies we had within Selma Vineyards, Turn Creek Bottom, and Elk Trail Water Project, Jen Powers was one of my clients where she was trying to do a home veterinary office on her property, 10 acres. Outright, you could have 20 horses there. You could do, you could have pigs, whatever you wanted to do there. But to put a business on a residence, you have to go through a use permit process. That's a $4,500 non-refundable fee, whether you get approved or not. Okay, so yeah, we asked the director of resource management, the assistant director, to come out and give us his advice whether he thought it would be compatible to do that or not. He advised us he saw no issue with that. Come and visited a place. He goes, to obtain the building permits, and we have no issue. 15 minutes before it went to the board, they changed their support and said they would not support the project after she had laid her money down to do that. Ultimately, push came to shove, I indicated that, you gave false advice, all these other items. She ended up finding another parcel that actually was better for her and better for the community also to develop that area because we had an empty building just sitting. So ultimately, we processed another use permit less than 60 days. Typically, they'll tell you it's 90 days minimum to get them through. Less than 60 days, and they got that one approved. But that was just one of the issues. So we're trying to get all the people to come together and require the board of supervisors to put people in place that are going to make it user-friendly and see if we can build these relationships and see if we can get them to move forward. We've actually looking at changing some of the ordinances and amendments and or omitting some of these things. There's ordinances in Shasta County, accessory structure for residential, detached structures on residential property. Maximum you can have is 2,500 square feet of detached structures. Doesn't matter if it's a half acre or 90 acres. Anything above that, you have to pay them $1,200 to ask them if it's okay to build it before the building permit. These things, I totally understand that if you were on a quarter acre, 2,500 square feet of accessory structures with your house, it might be 3,000. You might be overbuilding on the property, but not on 90 acres. They didn't put any of that in there. Why do you think they do that? Well, also, it forces you to work through a process with them, right? To come to them, and then they can control where it goes, suggestions, and that type of thing, plus fees again, right? It's all fee-based, right? So what is integrity really about? What's a good definition of integrity? I found a quote that kind of pretty much, and it's kind of what the Tea Party is about. One of the truest tests of integrity is the blunt refusal to compromise. Do not compromise. Why do we need that control? Anybody know what the purpose of the zoning code is? Their definition of the purpose of the zoning code, right in the beginning, said, this is on their website, to promote and protect public health, safety, peace, morals, comfort, and convenience. Morals, right? That's kind of like telling me how tall my building's got to be or where it can be. Yeah. That's pretty vague, isn't it? To implement the county's general plan to facilitate and guide growth in accordance with the general plan. Okay? So the building code used to be very simple. When I started studying building code, it was 1991. The purpose of the California Building Code was to establish minimum requirements for life, limb, and safety. That's what it was. The minimum requirement. Not everything you can find in the book. The minimum requirement. It now reads, the purpose of the California Building Code is to establish the minimum requirements for safeguard the public safety, public health, safety, general welfare, to structural standards, means of egress, facilities, sustainability, accessibility for persons with disabilities, sanitation, acquire adequate lighting, ventilation, and energy, and it goes on and on and on. Where did energy conservation come into public safety? Exactly. Actually, almost lobbying materials, right? You can lobby to get your light fixture to be the only one they can use in the state of California. And if you have the only approved standard, that's where you go. So that's what we're trying to do with the Integrity Project. We're trying to get people to come into this group, support us. It can be all this stuff. For every limitation you put on your neighbor, you're putting a limitation on yourself. A noise ordinance, distance to property line, the color of buildings. I don't know if anybody remembers about 15 years ago in the city of Chico where they had the lawsuit because the Marie Callender's put in palm trees. They said they weren't indigenous to the area. But that's their trademark. And that finally got thrown out. So our goals and vision for Shasta County would be to assure the Shasta County taxpayers that their elected officials and staffs would conduct business with integrity and provide cost-efficient and beneficial services to its citizens. Pretty simple, really. Do the job we elect you to do. If you can't do that, we'll fix that for you. What do you guys think about that? I mean, do you think the county employees serve you well now? I mean, has anybody went into a building department or a planning department and seen how long it takes to get there? And nobody can be waiting. It'll take them sometimes. I mean, I had one I had objection with was 22 minutes. Nobody was in line. That's how long it took them to come out to the counter. I mean, that's just ridiculous. So we're working on our three things that we want to assure Shasta County residents is accountability and transparency. We'd like the county to spend our hard tax-earned money on wisely, justly, and ethically matter. Like in Selma Vineyards, right? $45,000 a month for LA attorneys. Every month to do this. And I was the main consultant on it, and they never call us in for a meeting. Say, how do we resolve this? I requested the meeting. They said they wouldn't talk. You got the correction list. It's 11 pages long, 47 items, just take care of it. But you're asking me to take it out of the Williamson Act before I ever get an approved rezone. Why wouldn't that be a condition? That's the way it is. That's the answer. So we'd like to change that. Serve the public. The county should work with its residents and business to assist, not to obstruct them in obtaining business permits when necessary or required by law. They should help instruct you with that, right? And for the public benefit, invest our tax dollars to provide the highest level of community service and public safety possible. Simply be reasonable, right? Does it make any sense to spend $45,000 a month on an attorney when you could say, Mr. Anselmo, come up here with your consultant. Mr. Planner, come in here. What are our issues? Can we fix these? Let's attack these three and get them over and done with. That was never done in 2 years. We have an invitation to do that now. We got that invitation after we were at 3 board meetings requesting this over and over and over in Integrity Project. Makes a lot of difference. We had, nearly 50 people the last meeting, we thought? About 50 people stood up and said they were in support of the Integrity Project. That number keeps growing. They know you're all voters. Why do we have a Board of Supervisors meeting at 9 o'clock in the morning? Are you all free to go to that meeting? None of us work, right? None of us have other things planned. In Trinity County, they start that meeting usually at 1. They try to do usually the consent calendar and everything, and then they start the main part of the meeting at 6 p.m. so the public can go. And if you have one of the items you want to listen to and you can't get there, you can ask to have that moved back on the agenda to 7 or 7:30 and see if you can be there. Because they're serving the public. They need your input. All these things got passed with ordinances simply because you didn't show up there to fix this. You didn't object. And they encroached inch by inch. So we've started a petition out in the back, and we'd like you to sign it. We have 3 items that we're trying to get the Board of Supervisors to support change in. We'd like to provide a statute of limitations, 3 years, on as-built building violations. Once a county department is aware that it's there, they have 3 years to try to start some type of enforcement on it. Otherwise, you're free and clear. I work on projects that are 15 years. They gave them a notice 15 years ago. By the way, you had an illegal building, and they never said another word. How many times could that sell by a realtor? 3, 4 times. It's a new owner. They're not even aware. The old owner might have even passed away, or it's been inherited, moved along. So we'd like to do that. I mean, you can commit a felony that would have a maximum term of 7 years, and you have a 3-year statute of limitations on that. Buildings have none. Just keep going. So now that with this economic downturn, they've actually used that enforcement as a source of revenue. Get a building permit, get it engineered, or we'll tear it down. Either way, it costs taxpayers to do every one of those. Okay? Most of these buildings won't even comply anymore because the codes have changed. They change every 3 years. It won't even meet code. And if it's got electric and lighting in it, energy, those fixtures are not even approved to be used anymore. So for the other item we would like to do is that they shall not expire zoning or building permit applications. As long as there's communication going every 60 days, they shall not expire those. The current code says they may expire them. They take that may and they turn it in, they will. And they usually do it, it's usually 180 days, 6 months, and then you have to request an extension in writing. And if you don't do it, they can expire it and you have to start all over again. All over again. Mr. Anselmo's application, if I remember correctly, for the chapel was like $6,000 or something. And if they expired in 180 days, who gets the next $6,000 again? And what's the purpose of it? I mean, they received the fee already once. So we'd like to have that put in place. And then when codes or laws or policy does not clearly prohibit, control, or restrict or limit any undefined land use, business type, occupancy, that the item is allowed by right. If the code, ordinance, or law or policy does not clearly prohibit, control, restrict, or limit any undefined use, land use, business type, or occupancy, the item is allowed by right. What they're doing is interpreting, if you have something, a residential chapel, like Mr. Anselmo's. Anybody ever heard of one? You have another one here in Northern California. You have another private residential chapel. I think everybody knows the last name. It's Hearst. They have one in the cloud. But it's not defined. It's not defined in the building code. Planning code and building code allows them to determine the most similar use. Not to guess what the most similar use is. If you apply for a private residential chapel, they can't say it's going to be commercial, public, and provide ADA. That's what they did in this case. The same thing can happen to any one of you. If you put could you heat and air condition your garage? Sure. You put a bathroom in there? Sure. You put a closet in there? Sure. As soon as you put a closet in, they're going to call it a residence. The closet says it's a bedroom and it's a sleeping room. No code says that, but that's their policy. You have to also add additional link to your septic field for leach lines because they're calling that a bedroom. It's a sleeping room. Leach fields are done by bedroom numbers, not by bathrooms, not by fixtures, not by size. They're done by the size of the bedrooms. So make your bedroom 700 square feet. That's one bedroom, and that's the length. Makes no sense. It's not reasonable. So these are some of the type of items we're trying to change. Does anybody have any questions about the petition? The more people we can get on that and start requiring these changes, that's a whole other process, is how we make them change the code. They brought it to us, they didn't charge us to restrict us more. They did that for free. I guess you paid them, they were there, paying all their benefits and still paying their benefits. But we're going to ask them to start unrestricting those items or be more specific about the uses. It would be impossible to name every land use, but be more reasonable, or we wouldn't be asking to not restrict it. I mean, come on. If I have residential property and I can have a house on it, I know it's not the funnest thing, but if you got 3 acres, you're allowed 1 horse per every half acre if you have a full acre. So I could have 6 horses on 3 acres, right? Also, I could have 12 pigs, or there's certain things you may not want to have in a certain residence, but every time we limit that use, we restrict ourselves. Somebody made the comment earlier when I was here today about the chapel bells. People didn't like to hear the chapel bells because they could hear them such a long distance. When I spoke to a person who lived in that area, and I said, but you run tractors and you have hay and stuff. I'm sure at 2 o'clock in the morning, somebody doesn't want to hear that baler out there running neither, but that's when you got to put the hay up because that's when the dew is, right? I said, you shoot your shotgun to hunt doves. Some people wouldn't like that noise neither, but every time you restrict the use, right? That's why Shasta County doesn't have a noise ordinance. The city does, but the county doesn't. So we'd like you to support that project. If you have any questions, we're going to have the breakout group. You know, I help give people advice on what to do on their ordinances and codes and stuff like that. I do usually 20, 30 minutes for nothing. I don't do this for the money, these codes. Usually people request me to handle it because they're just so frustrated with the process. Just, you get to the point of, I mean, the chapel was applied for twice. We've applied for the heliport twice, the hangar twice, because they expired on us, because we can't get to the land use. You know, if you have agricultural property, and you can put a hay barn on it, and you can do all these items without use permits, right? But if you get a use permit by putting an agro-entertainment type center there, like Haas, you have a use permit like that, you go to put your next hay barn on, you have to revise your use permit for a new hay barn. Even though it was an inherent right, you could do it before because they want to make sure where the location is and that it's not going to affect anything with your use permit. I said, well, isn't that what the process of applying for a building permit's for? And so another $932 to amend it, $450 if it's a minor use change. It just goes on and on. A lot of these people go broke trying to get this done. It's your county. These people work for you. And most of these department heads are appointed at the will of the board. So we need to change that from the top side down. We have a perfect chance right now with resource management. Russ Mall retired. The new, yeah. And I'll say it, I did not. I worked there for a long time, and I saw a lot of people chewed up and spit out in that department. So we have a new manager there, good, bad, or indifferent. Let's give him the chance, but he is going to be under pressure to perform in the next 12 months. Usually these are temporary positions until after the 12th month. And so if he isn't performing or it's the same old, it's our job to stand up. I mean, like when you guys were talking about, question and answer, the person being questioned doesn't want, I want to be heard. You know what? And if we have 55 people or we have 12 people every week sitting there saying the same thing, we are tired of this, it's going to be easier to fix the problem than to listen to us over and over and over again. We need to pick our battles. Okay? So, anybody have any questions or? Yeah. Okay. Well, oh yeah. I mean, the environmental reports, archaeological, biological, the reports got endless. But you can also, if a person has the discretion to call for that for a residential garage. Yeah, I totally agree. We have a factory, we have a store going in, there's traffic impacts, there's a number of different things. We're not talking about those items. We're talking about, for instance, I would totally fight for a factory that was going to have covered parking. Okay, covered parking. If you just want to shade your cars, that's an extra $3.50 a square foot for traffic impact fee. Now, how does that make any difference, whether it's covered or not? Well, the way the ordinance, Shasta County's ordinance is written, it says any structure. It says any structure, if it's office, industrial, or commercial. And that's the only three ways you can label any of the non-residential types. And I say change that ordinance to allow for an appeal to say, I can prove that this has no traffic impact. The parking lot has more traffic impact than the structure. Right. And really, if you have a square foot commercial building, right, you need the parking lot to have to go with the commercial building, so the commercial building creates the impact, not. No, and also, but it is also inviting to have stores come in, right, to know that the process will be explicit and clean and how to do it, not obscure. Right. You're welcome. The lady in back. She was first, and I'll get you. Well, that's a kind of a three-part question there. I was a building official when the proposed sprinkler code came for what was high severity areas. I think that's what you're talking about, in the high severity areas, and nobody objected to that. All the counties had a time to make a comment about that it had no impact, environmental impact, it had no impact to the community and everything else. 2 jurisdictions responded negative. One was Trinity County, that was me, and Riverside, because they provided them the wrong map. They didn't even have them the right map. It wasn't even their county that they were trying to approve. Nobody else said anything. I had 3 meetings up there, nobody said anything. And I'd invite people and tell contractors, this is going to impact you. And when we finally informed them, they started speaking up and saying it. We did the letter, but 2 jurisdictions out of all the jurisdictions in California, we got run right over, right? So the international code, are we required to have a building code? Yeah, you are, because insurance companies are not going to insure you unless you build to a certain standard in safety. Otherwise, your insurance is going to be out of sight. So that's where the international code came in. The international code came in because you used to have 3 to 4 different building codes at any one time in the United States, and they were all different. So the trade people were always getting confused, how do I build it? So they made the international code, I think it's about 9 years ago now, to make them all the same. They call it international because the United States was about one of the first people to have building codes, true building codes. I mean, a trivia, right? What's the oldest building code? It's actually stated before the Bible, right? It's said that if you built something and something fell down and killed your son would be put to death. Yeah, that was the first building code. And it's extrapolated now to how high our rug can be and what the height of the step is and the height of the light switch and that type of thing. If you have more questions about the specific building codes, we can do that in a breakout group. You know, I'll go through it. I'll be happy to answer all those and how to help you get around those or what the definition of those are. Any questions about the petition? Yeah.
I understand on Samuel, we had an appeal on his, I think the county appealed something on Ensemble, and that judge sent it back to the state. Did that have any effect on why you're able to now sit down and start to talk about the issue?
No, I think the biggest effect we had is the groups coming together and saying, we want to solve this. we want to solve this. And Mr. Anselmo hasn't given up. He just keeps putting his lawyer back out there. I mean, I can tell you on many of the merits of the case that the county is reverse suing Anselmo on are not viable anymore. They admit that his project isn't even in the Williamson Act anymore, but they're suing him for like 6 counts of violation of the Williamson Act when his property's not even in it anymore. They admit that now. What's going to happen when you go to court and say, oh, by the way, we're not even in it? What's your judgment going to be? Do you want to go to court? They don't want to go to court with that. Freedom Religion Act, that's a separate issue, right? Processing these building permits. Who wins here? The attorney's the only ones winning. The sooner we can settle this, we all win. That's what we're trying to force is be reasonable about this, come back, leave the egos out of the room, and let's settle this.
Who is it actually up to make the decision?
Well, when I was a director, we always said you can count to 3. Board of Supervisors ultimately hire and fire all the department heads, right? And you can go from there. The issue is that I don't believe the board has been given the information. When I met with one of the board members who wanted to ask some questions about the permitting process, I said, do you realize this has been sent to a negotiator to be resolved? And the county said, pay us $25 million or we're leaving. That was a simple, that's not much of a negotiation, right? It doesn't say, well, we believe you're right here, let's give and take this. There's no compromising on what the line is. You lose. So the Board of Supervisors ultimately make the decision. That's your decision on who you put in there.
If the construction code changes every 3 years, lighting fixtures, plumbing fixtures, different things that you do with inside a home or a building, like you were stating earlier, if their code don't change every 3 years, pretty soon you're not going to build anything unless somebody, like you say, comes up with something new and they have to have that. How do they get it?
So they don't adopt a specific requirement, they just adopt the new code. You see what I mean? So when the new code comes out in 2013, they have a minimum of a year to adopt it, or they adopt it by state law, period. They're forced to adopt it. So when that new 2014 code comes out, so what is the trick? If you're going to build something, when you apply for your building permit, you're applying on that code. Whatever code is on the date of when you apply. What's the inherent problem if you expire a building permit? You could be in a new code again. And it's an as-built building. We have to start all over again with the new plans. So it's just a vicious cycle, goes back and forth. You understand why Mr. Anselmo's gotten frustrated? Yeah.
Who actually writes the building code?
The building code is written by a board of standards. Well, let's start. There's a couple of different codes, right? We have the international code, and then you have the California amendments to the international code. California has its own amendments that come into the code. You're allowed to put amendments into a building code for geological, weather items, or there's 4 items, and it can be the people, where you live, whether the conditions of the weather create a situation. So, they have a building standards national one that puts all these codes together. People propose changes to those codes, and they provide evidence of why they need to do that. And we're kind of getting off on it a little bit. I'll give you a real simple one. The gaps in guardrails used to be 9 inches. You used to have 9 inches between those. They're now 4. Why? Because little kids would fall through there and their head would hang up in the 9 inches and it'd break their neck. So they moved it down to 4. They can't get any body parts through. See? So that's just one of the proposals for the change of guardrails was at 9 inches. You could have all these decorative items, right? Then they started assessing people, started falling through those and getting hurt, and so they changed it. It went to 6, and then it went to 4. Just one of the reasons. So that was my job when I taught at Shasta College, was try to give you an explanation why a building code exists. There should be a purpose to that. There is for most of the standard ones. Yeah.
Integrity project just with the county or with the city also?
I work in the city also. We've started in the county, but
City's a real mess as far as the building department goes.
yeah, it's actually improved from where it was, but it's the same issues really.
Cities will never grow as long as they have building department officials like they have here.
But I guarantee you, if you make a change in the county, other places will start following suit. They meet once a month, every month, the third Thursday. They do further education. They discuss these code changes. And they want to try to keep everybody calling it the same. And if there's an easier process, believe me, I was an inspector. I know the inspectors personally, in Lassen and Siskiyou. I know these guys. They do not want to make these intermittent bad calls. Less is more. Life, limb, and safety, that's what it's about. They really don't like having to make these obscure calls. But it's the person at the counter whether you can get that processed. Okay?
Okay, so survival.
We also have some integrity cards out there that I'd like you to fill out. And, they talked about the library, you guys. Anybody ever saw the building codes? What they look like? They're 9 volumes. They're about this wide. Each binder is about this wide. I have those electronically. So if anybody wants to contact Integrity, I'll forward those. They're not copyrighted. They're required by state law for people to have access to so they can build to the code. I can send you those. You just need to tell me which volume you want. Okay?